And now let's talk to Premier Kathy Dunderdale. Premier, you're on the air. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Bill.
How are you doing these days?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
Enjoying your summer, I trust?
Well, it's a busy summer. There's not much downtime in this job, but it gives me the ability to be out and about at different events all around the province. I spend a whole lot more time on the ground with people.
Absolutely.
Talking about what's important to them, and I have to say that I really, truly enjoy that. It's a particularly enjoyable time.
I must say,
in this job.
I must say, obviously, as Premier, you have a different perspective on it, but when I was in politics myself, the part I enjoyed most was just what you just said there, talking to people, going around, going to your constituency and so on. It was no joke, I can tell you, in the old days, trying to grapple with infinite demands with very finite resources. And to a certain extent, you've reached that position too, eh? I mean,
but that never changes, Bill.
Never.
That never changes. Technology, for example, just on the IT end of things, people are looking for new advancements on a daily basis. We're only 500,000 people, but we're a coastal people. So as well as anybody else in this place, the demands on infrastructure and new infrastructure and the upkeep on infrastructure, healthcare. People want more and more services where they live. And so, I don't know how much money you would need to have enough money to satisfy everybody's demands.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I just say to people, it's pretty much like your household income on a much larger level. But as you know, the same principles apply.
Yeah.
And so everybody lives within the envelope of what they have, and we do as a province too. So you have to allocate, so much to maintenance, so much to ongoing services. You have to pay down your debt, your mortgage, your credit card, all of those kinds of things. So it's very much the same principles at work in terms of allocating funds, and very few families, couldn't use more at the end of the month, and we're in the same place.
I remember when Medicare came in back in the late 60s, somebody projected that if we leave it alone, every single cent from all sources of revenue was going to be spent on health care unless we kept sort of the cover on or kept the pressure on, keeping it down and so on. And how much truer is that today with an aging population than it was even then? I mean,
no question. There is absolutely no question, and that's why our demographics are so important to us, because, in a healthy profile of a population, you have a lot of people at the bottom of the pyramid that are working and providing taxes to the Treasury, so we can provide things like health services to the smaller group at the top of the pyramid. Well, our pyramid is almost inversed in Newfoundland and Labrador. Our working population is not near big enough, and our aging population, of which you and I are now part of, is much larger. So
being a perfect gentleman, I say me more than you, though, Premier.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate that.
Okay.
So there are particular challenges in Newfoundland and Labrador. Almost half of our budget goes into healthcare. We spend more per capita in this region of the country than any other on healthcare. And yet, we listen to your program every day, and there's just more and more and more demand, and legitimate demands. There's nothing wrong with what people ask for. But, you have to live within your means as best you can. So, difficult decisions have to be made on a pretty regular basis around these things.
Absolutely. Well, we talked to Paul Orme this morning, a great supporter of yours. He's in the home care business, of course. Delighted that the $50 subsidy or $50 is added to the personal care home subsidy. But he said, we really need $150 more. Nobody is ever satisfied, even great supporters of yours.
No, and people aren't, there are new cancer drugs that become available on a regular basis, People want to live in their own homes for as long as they possibly can. Families need support. We understand all of that. You know, as politicians, we're not apart from all of that. We are undergoing the same pressures in our own families, you know, with our friends and community and so on, and we represent our constituents, so we're hearing those kinds of stories every day. And so again, you know, sometimes it requires the wisdom of Solomon, and none of us have that, but you make the best choices you can with the amount of resources that you have to work with, and help people try to understand that when you can do more, you will do more. But sometimes that takes a little longer than most people are satisfied with.
Right. Premier, you're heading to a Premier's meeting. I believe it's semi-annual. It's a very important institution in our country, the meetings of Premiers. It kind of almost takes the place of a dysfunctional Senate that they have in many federations, so it's a very important institution. At the one coming up that you're going to is the Muskrat Falls and the position taken by Quebec. Is that on the agenda, or is it going to be able to be raised?
It won't be on the agenda. Without a doubt, it will get raised. But you know, as I said yesterday, energy policy in Newfoundland and Labrador won't be decided at cost. And I'll guarantee you it won't be decided in Quebec. You know, we decided and when we came to government in 2003, that if nothing else, we were going to be masters of our own destiny. So the first piece for us was to understand everything we possibly could about the Churchill River, and particularly the Upper Churchill contract, regardless of what else we were going to do in terms of the Lower Churchill. But in the management of that contract, in the challenging of that contract, what did it mean for us in the short term, medium term, long term, and how were we going to deal with it up to 2041? And we also needed to wrap our heads around what was going to happen after 2041. And so that's been a piece of work that we have been hard at since 2003. So, you know, we also knew that we wanted to develop the Lower Churchill. As you know, we're an energy-rich province. It's where our hope is for long-term economic stability. It is the greatest resource we have in hydroelectricity, in wind, in tidal, when it's developed enough to be commercial. And all of that development can be supported now by our offshore, the gas and in the future, the oil now and the gas in the future. And we made a decision we'd use those resources to develop the renewables. So our first objective was to try and work with Quebec, because that's the easiest route. You know, we could sell all of gull and muskrat to Ontario, and they would welcome it. But we have to find a pathway through Quebec. So we started to work that piece. You know, we said to them, okay, we are always going to challenge the Upper Churchill contract because it is unbalanced and unfair. But we're going to use whatever legitimate means are available to us to challenge that contract. We're never going to stop that. But we're always going to meet our obligations. We're an ethical people. We're going to build an ethical energy company here. So the people in Newfoundland and Labrador are always going to keep their word and meet their obligations under this contract. But however, let's put that to one side. And let's talk about how can we develop projects further down the river. The people of Newfoundland and Labrador have to be the principal beneficiaries, but we know you have to get a good return as well. Can we work together? No, we couldn't. Absolutely not. So because of Quebec's commercial arrangements in the United States, we had the ability to apply for open access transmission through Quebec because of that, and the United States regulations under their federal energy regulator. We went through that process, and we believe we were unfairly thwarted in that piece. And we had a comparator because we were also applying under the same regulations in New Brunswick. And what we could achieve in New Brunswick in 6 months in that process, we couldn't achieve in Quebec in 2 years. And so they denied us access, and we're appealing that decision through the courts in Quebec. We know we don't expect to be successful there. And we know at the end of the day, we're likely going to end up in the United States before FERC resolving this issue.
But even then, I mean, it was resolved in our favor. As somebody once said when the Upper Churchill was being developed, I think it was René Lévesque, said, who's going to protect any line through Quebec that we don't agree with from sabotage by radicals and so on that we have no control over? I mean, it's like a mafia shakedown. I mean, you can rely on the law, or try to rely on the law, but how do you combat that kind of a threat?
Absolutely amazing. And we call on the federal government to develop an energy strategy for Canada, not only for Newfoundland and Labrador, but for the country, because this is a matter of energy security. We haven't been successful there. We've had some success at COF. We brought, Newfoundland and Labrador held the pen on the energy strategy in 2007. I co-chair the group now. Significant challenges in it. Quebec is not cooperating. British Columbia is not cooperating. But the rest of us are. And we're going to keep at it because conditions change. I just want to share that. So I want to share two things with you. First, so when Quebec wouldn't cooperate with us, anyway we tried, we knew we had to develop a strategy that took them out of the equation. And that's when we started looking at the Maritime Link. And the Maritime Link and the development of Muskrat Falls and the work we have done there has been validated by every expert, every financial institution, and the federal government who have looked at it. There hasn't been one complaint of substance. In fact, even the last year people have been, it's the same group of people in this province, and it's the same group of people who always take Quebec's side. And it kills me that the two opposition parties wrap themselves up in whatever Quebec's position is and speak to it here instead of giving a balanced view. But, they've been telling us there isn't a market for excess muskrat power outside of Newfoundland and Labrador. And the URIB just dispelled that. But, every argument, when it's put to the test of the experts, it has failed. The other piece in terms of Quebec, and this is when John Charest was about to leave, he and I and Dalton McGuinty were having a conversation that if he were successful in his bid for re-election in Quebec, how we could work together to get Gull power to Ontario. And he gave a reflection at the last COF meeting that he attended. And he was talking specifically to Alberta and BC, who were having a dispute about the pipeline. And he was basically saying to them, think on. He said, I've been involved with Newfoundland and Labrador this past year talking about how we might be able to do business together. And there are challenges, political challenges in that we need to overcome. But he said that has given me cause for reflection about the open wound, the open sore of the Upper Churchill contract on both our provinces and the effect that it has had on our relationship. And I wonder if the outcome of Meech Lake might have been a little different if we had dealt with that in a different way.
Interesting.
So he was saying to Alberta and BC, think on before you go down the same path we went down, because there are prices to be paid. And so for now, Quebec doesn't need anything from us. Again, they're in that position now. But that will change.
Right.
But something, we're not going to be held hostage by Quebec. We have studied, in terms of this last move, it's a desperate move by an arrogant utility, backed by an arrogant government when it comes to Newfoundland and Labrador.
Right.
We know that contract upside down and inside out, and regardless of Muskrat Falls, we would be treating the renewal contract different than the original because the language is clear and we're going to deliver the power differently.
Premier Dunderdale, assuming a worst case scenario, we know Quebec is always going to be going for, I think you even said they're acting in their own best interest, maybe selfishly and arrogantly, but they're trying to look after their own best interests. Assuming a worst case scenario that Quebec did in fact in the future win this latest legal initiative that they have taken against Muskrat Falls, assume that they won at all levels, including the Supreme Court of Canada, what does that do, Premier, to the Muskrat Falls project?
It doesn't impact negatively on the Muskrat Falls contract unless Quebec is prepared to stop generating electricity at the Upper Churchill. I mean, this is about water management and the flow of water down the Churchill River. Well, if they're not going to flow water so that it can come down to Muskrat Falls and create energy a second time, it means you're not creating energy at Muskrat Falls. So if you're not going to flow the water over the dam, then you're not going to generate electricity. So is Hydro-Quebec telling us they're going to give up their 5,000 megawatts of electricity coming over Churchill Falls, that they're going to kill their cash cow and they're going to turn off lights in Quebec in order to stop electricity generation at Muskrat Falls? Kill
the goose that lays the golden egg. Absolutely. Just to get at us. They're not going to do it.
And that's only one piece. I mean, there are other tools that we would have to counter any such move by Hydro-Quebec. But the greatest negative impact will be on Hydro-Quebec and the people of Quebec, as opposed to Muskrat Falls.
Interesting. So you have no fears there. Are you frightened at all of the qualified or conditional approval of the PUB equivalent in Nova Scotia?
No, not at all. It's a good ruling. It validates again the work that we have done on Muskrat Falls and all of the things that the people of the province have heard from every expert who's been asked to give an opinion on this project. We're happy to sell power to Nova Scotia at fair market value. Opposition members are putting out so much misinformation. They're not asking for cheaper power. They're asking for fair market price power. If we have power to sell, we're more than happy to give that to them. But, the excess power is going to be used in Labrador if it's required. We're happy to sell it to Nova Scotia until it's needed, or somewhere else until it's needed in Labrador. The bottom line is we have complete control of 65% of that maritime link. So we're going to fill that up with something. We're energy rich in this province, and we're going to do that, and that's not a difficult piece for us to work out with Amera, how we're going to do that and how we're going to get fair market value for our energy. So that's good news for Newfoundland and Labrador. For people who may have been concerned about some of the rhetoric and misinformation that's been thrown around by the opposition, this clearly demonstrates that there's a market for Muskrat Falls power.
Premier Dunderdale, Moody's has maintained your justifiably proud credit rating for Newfoundland and Labrador. But I assume that credit rating was arrived at before these latest initiatives by Quebec and the approval in Nova Scotia. Do you think the credit rating will be maintained once those new developments are factored into the analysis by Moody's?
Oh, absolutely. And, we've had internally this project has had to have ratings, and they have been better than we even anticipated. So that process of rating this project internally and giving it a grade has happened during the last year in particular, and the project stands up very well. This is a solidly planned piece of work that's in the best interest of the people of the province. And, it's the beginning of good things for this province in terms of our renewable energy portfolio.
Premier, one analyst from Toronto was on one of the media this morning and is known to have commented on it before, of course, talked about writing a column a couple of years ago. He thinks the project is not based on expertise but on a political whim. What's your reaction to that?
I have no idea where people get these ideas. What political whim? How would it be in my best interest to be responsible as Premier of this province and leader of this government for a project that who would want to share or be part of the terrible history that we currently have on the Churchill River. It's the same accusations that people make against Nalcor. It's the one thing that we know better probably than the bulk of other things in this province is the generation of electricity and the transmitting of electricity. We've been at it for nearly 50 years. We have the most cantankerous, I would say, customer in North America, in Hydro-Quebec. We have that generating station up in the wilds of Labrador, built by Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, run by Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, delivering that amount of electricity not only to Quebec, but to Labradorians. And has anybody ever heard a squeak or a complaint coming out of Labrador or Hydro-Quebec about how we do that business and how we generate that electricity and how we deliver it? We have some of the best expertise in this world, and it should be a source of pride for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians about Nalcor, their company, because their success is our success. There's only one stakeholder in the ownership of Nalcor, and that's the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. So every time they do something well and make money, that's money in the pockets of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. So we understand electricity, the making of electricity, the generation of electricity, the marketing of electricity, and the development of electricity. Because now we have Churchill Falls, we have Beta Spare, and so on.
Right.
And so we know this business inside out. And so, if somebody has something legitimate to say, and there's a concern here, the onus is on us to deal with that, and I certainly don't mind people asking questions. Right. Lorraine Michael says, where does she get her confidence? She gets her confidence from doing the work. And we've been doing this work since 2003. We have confidence in Nalcor, in Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro, and so can the people of the province.
Premier, one final question from me. The meeting of the premiers that you're gearing up to go to now, is that going to be, any part of that going to be public? For the encounter that may take place between yourself and Premier Marois, are we going to be treated to that on by television cameras, or is it all going to be behind closed doors?
Most of it is behind closed doors. I mean, Premier Marois has been trying to pick a fight with Newfoundland and Labrador since she became Premier. It's this whole business with Old Harry.
Yeah.
Look, the piece of work that was done 50 years ago wasn't ratified. Go work with the federal government to do your part to get ready to do the negotiation, because we have our part done, and we're prepared to sit at the table and talk about it. We might come back even to the same boundary, but we're not going to accept work that was done 50 years ago and wasn't ratified. Go do it. We'll sit down and we'll see. And you must be awfully worried about that boundary line, because all this racket you've been trying to kick off publicly, you could have gone, had the process put in place, and we could have had this resolved. So you don't want to do that. Why don't you want to do it? Okay. Are you nervous that there's going to be a new boundary line, or do you just want to pick a row? They have been coming to every meeting and saying, we're opting out of this energy strategy, yet they're showing up at the meeting and they're railing about the fact that we got a loan guarantee. A loan guarantee that's not going to cost the people of Canada 5 cents, while tens of millions of dollars get put into Quebec on an annual basis on R&D for wind development, nuclear peace, all of this kind of stuff. Nobody else in the country saying anything. So I'm at a place today to say, if you're opting out of the energy strategy, then opt out.
Right.
Stay away from these discussions.
All right. Well, Premier Dunderdale, thanks very much for joining us. We've had a lengthy conversation, and no doubt you've noticed that you had opportunity to expand on your point of view, freely, and that's the way it should be.
I do thank you for that.
And we would ask you, perhaps in the future, on some of these issues, maybe we can deal with them again. And when you get back from the Premier's Conference, by all means, join us if you can.
I will do.
And let us know how Quebec and the Premier reacted to your encounter with her. We'd appreciate that.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for giving me this time. I really do appreciate it.
Anytime. These are vital and important issues, obviously, and we're delighted you were able to join us this morning.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Premier Kathy Dunderdale dealing with the whole Muskrat Falls situation. Anybody who has a point of view, now not much time left, but join us tomorrow and the next day to respond to what she had to say. We'll be back.